The air inside the concrete pillbox test is like copper and dirt. Tarawa Atoll, November 20th, 1943. 4 Japanese soldiers press their backs against the coral walls. They can hear American boots crunching through the sand outside. 30 yards away, then 20. The lieutenant grips his Nambu pistol and waits. A hiss, then a roar. Liquid fire pours through the firing slit like water from a burst dam. Not fire, something else. Thicker, sticky. It splashes across the floor, climbs the walls, clings to uniforms and skin. The heat is immediate, unbearable, biblical. 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. The air vanishes. Lungs collapse searching for oxygen that no longer exists. The lieutenant never fires his weapon. Outside, Marine Corporal James Walsh lowers the nozzle of his M1, a 1 flamethrower. The pillbox is silent. He doesn't look inside. He never does. The concrete glows faint orange at the edges. That's the new fuel, the one that sticks, the one that doesn't. Roll off like gasoline. It stays wherever it lands and burns until there's nothing left to burn. He didn't know the name yet. Few did. Napalm, a word that would outlive the war. That would become synonymous with horror and efficiency in equal measure. A weapon born not from hatred, but from desperation. From a chemist's obsession with making fire behave. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Cambridge, Massachusetts. January 1942. The United States had been at war for 6 weeks. Pearl Harbor still smoldered in the national memory. Young men lined up at recruitment stations. Factories retoiled for tanks and bombers. And in the basement of Harvard University's Converse Chemistry Laboratory, a middle-aged professor with round glasses and ink-stained fingers sat surrounded by beakers, gasoline, and rubber. Louis Fieser was 42 years old. Respected, tenured, known for his work on vitamins and blood-clotting agents. He'd synthesized vitamin K in 1939, a breakthrough that saved lives in operating rooms across America. The National Academy of Sciences had elected him just 2 years prior. He was a man of science, of precision, of order. Now, the government wanted him to make better fire. The request came through the National Defense Research Committee, a bureaucratic title for a wartime imperative. Develop an incendiary weapon that could destroy Japanese cities. Cities built of wood and paper. Cities that would burn if you could only make the fire stick long enough. The problem was old. Flamethrowers existed. Germany had used them in the First World War. America fielded its own version, the M1, in 1942. But they were failures. Gasoline burned too fast. It exploded in a brilliant bloom at the nozzle, consuming itself before reaching the target. Range, 15 yards. Duration, 8 seconds. Operators had to crawl within spitting distance of enemy positions. Many never crawled back. What the military needed was simple. Fire that traveled farther. Fire that lasted longer. Fire that didn't evaporate or roll off surface but clung like wet paint. Fieser understood the chemistry. Gasoline was a liquid, low viscosity. It a splash. It dripped. To make it stick, you had to thicken it, turn it into a gel. The British had tried using rubber dissolved in gasoline, latex. It worked, marginally, but rubber was scarce. Japan controlled the plantations in Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. The Allies couldn't get enough. Fieser needed an alternative, something synthetic, something America could produce in unlimited quantities. He assembled a team of 6, graduate students and junior chemists. They worked in secret. No publications, no discussions outside the lab. Harvard paid his salary, but the work belonged to the War Department. His wife, Mary, a chemist herself and frequent collaborator, knew nothing of the project for weeks, until she met Major Rambout at the airport and he asked how her husband's incendiary research was progressing. The lab smelled perpetually of gasoline and burnt wood. They tested hundreds of compounds, aluminum salts, fatty acids, soaps made from coconut oil, naphthenate acid from crude petroleum, palmitate acid from palm oil, mix them with gasoline, steer. Observe. Most failed. The gel would separate, or it wouldn't ignite properly, or it burned too fast, no better than raw gasoline. January turned to February. Fieser worked 18-hour days. His team burned samples in metal trays. Timed the combustion, measured temperatures, recorded viscosity. The military wanted results. American troops were dying in the Pacific. Every week brought news of another island, another beach, another fortified position that artillery couldn't crack. Then, on February 14th, 1942, the mixture worked. Aluminum naphthenate, aluminum palmitate, 2. Aluminum soaps, combined in powder form. When mixed with gasoline at room temperature, they formed a thick, tough gel. Fieser poured a sample into a wooden frame, lit it with a match. The gel burned steadily, evenly, with a tight, dark flame. No explosion, no bloom, just controlled, persistent combustion. Range, doubled. Burn time, 30 seconds, long enough. A named it napalm, from naphthenate, palm from palmitate. The acronym was clean, professional, forgettable. Nothing about the name suggested what it would become. The report went to Washington. The Chemical Warfare Service approved production immediately. A company called Nuadex Products received the first contract. By mid-April, they developed a brown, dry powder, not sticky itself. But when stirred into gasoline, it transformed. Thick as applesauce at first. Then, after sitting, a gel. Tough, cohesive, combustible. One of Fieser's colleagues suggested adding white phosphorus to the mixture. Phosphorus ignites spontaneously in air. Burns at 4,500 degrees. It would ensure the napalm caught fire and keep it burning, even in wet conditions. The addition also gave the gel a horrifying secondary effect. Phosphorus particles embedded in flesh, burrowing deep into muscle tissue, burning day after day until surgically removed or until there was no tissue left. Fieser accepted the modification. He was a chemist. The goal was efficiency, making the weapon work. Morality was someone else's jurisdiction. On July 4, 1942, they conducted the first full-scale test, not in a lab. On the soccer field near Harvard Business School, a makeshift pool filled with shallow water, 45 pounds of napalm in a metal container, a white phosphorus igniter. Members of the Cambridge Fire Department stood by. Tennis players on nearby courts paused mid-serve. Fieser pressed the button. The explosion was controlled, disciplined. Flaming lumps of gel are said through the air, splashing into the water. They didn't extinguish. They floated, burning. The water boiled around them. Smoke rose in thick black columns. The fire department moved in with hoses. It took minutes to suppress the flames. Minutes. One of the engineers turned to Fieser. "This stuff," he said quietly, "is 6 times stronger than thermite." Thermite was the standard incendiary, used in grenades, used in bombs. Napalm made it obsolete. Production scaled rapidly. By August, factories were churning out tons of the powder, simple to manufacture, cheap, stable in storage, simply with you not profit. It tolerated heat, surviving temperatures above 150 degrees Fahrenheit, tropical conditions, jungle humidity. It also withstood cold, remaining effective at -40 degrees. Arctic environments, high-altitude bomb bays. The powder traveled in canisters, 50-pound drums, easy to ship, no special handling required. Soldiers mixed it with gasoline in the field. Just sprinkle and stir. 3 minutes, and you had a weapon. Fieser joked that it was easier than making a cake. But even as production ramped up, Fieser kept refining. Napalm wasn't perfect. 30 seconds wasn't long enough for some applications. And while it stuck better than gasoline, it could still be wiped off with enough force. Napalm needed to be stickier, to burn hotter, to last longer. The answer came in 1944. Napalm B, a new formula. Polystyrene and benzene replaced the aluminum soaps. The result was a gel that burned for 10 minutes. Not 30 seconds, 10 minutes. Temperature, 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. It clung to surface like glue. You couldn't scrape it off. You couldn't wash it away. It burned until it consumed itself and whatever it touched. White phosphorus became essential for ignition. The gel was too stable to light with a simple flame. It needed heat, intense, sustained heat. Phosphorus provide that, and when the phosphorus ignited the napalm, the combination was unstoppable. Springfield, Massachusetts, December 1942. The first M101 flamethrowers arrived at the armory. Modified M1s, resigned to handle thickened fuel, higher pressure tanks, reinforced nozzles, capable of projecting napalm 40 to 50 yards, triple the range of the original, soldiers trained on dummy targets, wooden structures, sandbag bunkers. They learned to aim low, to let the gel splash and flow, to hold the trigger just long enough. Flamethrower operators carried 70 pounds of equipment, 2 fuel tanks on their backs, a wand in their hands, a battery-powered ignition system. They were slow, vulnerable, obvious targets, but they were also invaluable because napalm solved a problem no other weapon could. Fortified positions, concrete pillboxes, log bunkers covered with earth and steel, machine gun nests dug into coral or rock. Artillery might damage them, mortars might suppress them, but napalm eliminated them. Poured it through firing slits and ventilation shafts. Flow it into tunnels and trenches. Consumed the oxygen, baked the occupants alive, or suffocated them before the flames arrived. The psychological effect was instant. Men who survived artillery fire broke when flamethrowers appeared. The sight of liquid fire climbing walls, searching corners, unstoppably impatient, shattered morale faster than bullets. Surrender became preferable to burning. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan had Dugin, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima. Islands fortified with coral and concrete. Caves deep enough to survive naval bombardment. Bunkers reinforced with steel rails and oil drums filled with sand. Defenders who refused evacuation, who chose death over surrender, who waited in darkness for Americans to come close enough to kill. The Marine Corps needed a weapon for this kind of war. Napalm was it. Tarawa, November 1943. Corporal James Walsh stepped off the landing craft into chest-deep water. Around him, men fell. Machine guns swept the beach from hidden positions. Mortars dropped into the surf. The coral tore through boots. Bodies floated face down. Those who reached the shore crawled behind seawall remnants and burning wreckage. Pinned. Walsh carried an M101, 70 pounds strapped to his back. His assistant, Private Miller, carried the spare fuel tanks and a rifle. They trained together at Camp Pendleton. Learned to work as a pair. One ignites, one guards. Both move fast. Both expect to die. By afternoon, they'd crawled 300 yards inland. Slow, bloody. Every yard earned with grenades and rifle fire. And everywhere, pillboxes, dozens of them. Low, camouflage, interconnected by trenches. Each one spit bullets until someone silenced it. Explosives didn't work. Grenades bounced off. Bazooka rounds punched holes but left defenders alive. Walsh's company commander pointed at a pillbox 50 yards ahead, a machine gun nest, pinning down 2 platoons. Flanking was impossible. The ground offered no cover. Frontal. Assault meant death. The commander looked at Walsh. He didn't have to say it. Walsh and Miller crawled forward, slowly, using the dead for cover, using shell craters. The machine gun fired in bursts, searching. 30 yards, then 20. They reached a low depression, 10 yards from the target. Close enough. Miller tapped Walsh's shoulder. Turned the valve. Pressurized the tanks. Walsh rose to one knee, aimed the wand, and pulled the trigger. The stream of napalm shot forward. Dark, tight. Not the bright orange fireball from movies. A jet of burning gel. It struck the pillbox entrance and splashed it inside. Immediately, smoke poured from every opening. Not white smoke, black, thick. Choking. The machine gun stopped. Walsh held the trigger for 3 seconds. 4. 5. The gel kept flowing, coating walls, pooling on floors, igniting everything. The smoke turned to flame. A dull roar echoed from inside the concrete. Then, silence. Miller rose, rifle ready. They waited. No movement. No. Return fire. They moved to the next position. By the end of the day, Walsh's unit had cleared 11 pillboxes, every one with napalm. The tally was the same across the island. Where flamethrowers went, resistance ended. Quickly, completely, horribly. The statistics told the story. American casualties on Tarawa, over 3,000. Japanese casualties, nearly 5,000. Almost none surrendered. Most died in fortifications. Many burned alive. The ones who escaped the flames ran into American reefless. Some collapsed at 15 feet from safety. Their lungs had already failed. Carbon monoxide, oxygen depletion, hyperthermia. It wasn't a battle. It was extermination. Methodical, necessary, brutal. After Tarawa, every Marine division received flamethrower units. Training intensified. Tactics refined. Operators learned to work with rifle squads. Suppressing fire covered their approach. Once in range, they unleashed hell. Bunkers that held platoons fell in minutes. Caves that resisted 4 days collapsed in seconds. Napalm didn't care about cover. It flowed everywhere fire could reach, and it burned until nothing remained. Back in Cambridge, Fieser read the reports. Confirmed kills, successful deployments, tactical effectiveness. The numbers were clean, abstract. He never saw the photographs, the charred bodies, the melted skin, the Marines who vomited after using their weapons. He saw data, proof that his formula worked. He kept working, improving, refining. The military wanted more, always more. Longer burn times, higher temperatures, better adhesion. Fieser delivered. By 1944, napalm had become standard issue. Every flamethrower in the Pacific carried it. Every incendiary bomb dropped on Japan contained it. Millions of pounds produced monthly, shipped across oceans, stored in depots, mixed in the field. It was America's quiet advantage. The weapon no one talked about but everyone relied on, and the enemy couldn't replicate it. Japan tried. They captured American flamethrowers, analyzed the fuel, but they lacked the industrial chemistry to synthesize the thickening agents. Their attempts produced inferior gels, unstable, weak, ineffective. Germany faced the same problem. They knew about napalm. Intelligence reports described its effects, but they couldn't manufacture it. Their chemists lacked access to the raw materials. Naphthenate acid required specific petroleum refining processes. Palmitate acid came from coconuts, resources Japan controlled, not Germany. And by 1944, Germany's industrial base was collapsing, bombed, sabotaged, starved of fuel and materials. Napalm remained an American secret, a monopoly of fire, one that would decide the war's final chapter. Because the Pacific Islands were just the beginning, the real test was coming. Cities, millions of people, wooden structures packed together like kindling, waiting for a spark. And Louis Fieser had given them more than a spark. He'd given them a firestorm. Saipan, June 19th, 1944. The island burns, not metaphorically, literally. Smoke columns rise from dozens of points across the volcanic rock. Marine engineers stand beside a cave in transit, 20 feet wide, carve it into the hillside. Intelligence reports say 300. Japanese soldiers hide inside. Artillery has failed. Grenades bounce back. Rifle fire disappears into darkness. Sergeant William Porter checks his M2 flamethrower, the newer model. Lighter, more reliable, 68 pounds loaded. He's used it 11 times in the past week. Each time, the same result. Resistance ends. He approaches the cave mouth. His assistant covers him with a Browning automatic rifle. Suppressing fire rakes the entrance. Porter stops 10 yards out. Close enough. He pulls the trigger. The napalm stream arcs forward, disappears into the cave. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then, a roar. Not from the weapon, from inside the mountain. The cave exhales flame. Black smoke pours out like water from a broken dam. Men stumble into daylight. Clothes burning, skin blackened. They collapse. Some raise their hands. Most don't move at all. Porter doesn't look. He's learned not to. He moves to the next cave. There are 43 more on this ridge alone. By sunset, the ridge will be silent. By morning, burial details will count the dead. The numbers will be precise, Clinical. The reports will read, enemy fortifications neutralized via incendiary weapons. No mention of the smell, the sound. The way napalm turns a cave into an oven. This was the new reality of the Pacific War. Island after island, cave after cave, fire after fire. American forces advanced, not through courage alone, but through chemistry, through Louis Fieser's gel, through a weapon so effective it became indispensable, so horrifying it became routine. Meanwhile, 6,000 miles west, another kind of fire was being planned, not tactical, strategic, not against bunkers, against cities. The architects of this fire sat in offices in Washington and Guam, generals, analysts, targeting officers. They studied maps of Japan, identified cities, measured distances, calculated bomb loads, and they wondered, could napalm do to Tokyo what it did to Tarawa? The answer came from Major General Curtis LeMay, 48 years old, cigar-chewing, blunt, ruthless, commander of the 21st Bomber Command. He'd overseen raids over Germany, precision bombing, high altitude, minimal casualties. It hadn't worked. Clouds obscured targets. Bombs missed. Factories rebuilt overnight. Germany fought on. Japan would be different. LeMay studied the intelligence. Japanese cities were not Berlin. They were wood, paper, bamboo. Structures separated by narrow streets. Fire breaks, non-existent. Water supply, inadequate. Air defenses, weakening. The cities were kindling. They just needed the right match. Napalm was the match. In February 1945, LeMay ordered a test, 400 B-29 bombers. Target, Tokyo. Payload, incendiary bombs filled with napalm gel. Not high explosives, not precision munitions. Fire. Each bomb carried 165 gallons, enough to cover 2,500 square yards when dispersed. The bombs were simple, metal casings, napalm inside, white phosphorus igniters. No guidance systems, no complex fuses. Drop them and they worked, always. The first raid occurred on February 25th. Results were promising. Several city blocks burned. But LeMay wanted more. Total destruction. A fire so large it created its own weather. He studied German raids on London, British raids on Hamburg and Dresden. He read reports on firestorms, how they formed, how they spread, how they consumed everything. The key was saturation. Enough bombs in a small area to overwhelm firefighting efforts, to ignite so many fires simultaneously that they merged, that they fed each other, that they created a vortex of superheated air pulling oxygen from the ground, sending flames thousands of feet into the sky. A furnace that burned until there was nothing left to burn. LeMay scheduled the raid for March 9, 1945. 334 B-29s, each carrying 7 tons of incendiary bombs. Target, the industrial and residential heart of Tokyo, a 12-square-mile area. Over 1 million people live there, most in wooden homes, most with nowhere to go. The bombers came at midnight, low altitude, 5,000 feet. Under the effective range of Japanese anti-aircraft guns, they flew in streams, one after another. The first bombs fell at 12:15 a.m. M69 incendiary clusters. Each cluster held 47 bomblets. Each bomblet, 6 pounds of napalm gel. They tumbled through the darkness, spreading across the target zone. When they struck, white phosphorus igniters fired. Instantly, thousands of small fires erupted. Roofs, streets, courtyards, parks. Within minutes, the fires merged. Wind picked up, not natural wind, wind created by the fires themselves. Heat rising, cool air rushing in to replace it. 50 miles per hour, then 60, then 70. A hurricane of fire. Temperatures at ground level exceeded 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Wood didn't burn, it vaporized. Metal twisted, glass melted. People caught in the open ignited like matches. The bombers kept coming, wave after wave, dropping their payloads. The crews could smell the smoke at 5,000 feet, could see the flames reflecting off their fuselages. Some later reported they could feel the heat through the aircraft skin. The city below had become a sea of orange, a landscape of fire, unbroken, undifferentiated, total. By 3 a.m., the bombers had departed. The fires burned until morning. 16 square miles consumed, not 12. 16. Over 100,000 dead, most from burns. Many from asphyxiation. The firestorm had sucked the oxygen from bomb shelters, from basements, from canals where people dove it to escape the flames. They drowned, or they suffocated, or they boiled alive when the water heated past tolerance. Survivors described the aftermath, bodies piled in intersections, charred beyond recognition, rivers clogged with corpses, the smell indescribably persistent, the smoke visible from Guam, 1,400 miles away. American reconnaissance flights photographed the devastation. Entire neighborhoods erased, foundations exposed, a moonscape of ash and rubble. The death toll exceeded Hiroshima, exceeded Nagasaki, more dead in Tokyo on March 9th than in either atomic bombing. But the atomic bombs got the press. Napalm did the work. LeMay ordered more raids. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. 64 cities in total, each one burned, each one saturated with napalm. By war's end, over 400,000 Japanese civilians had died in incendiary raids, millions more displaced, homeless, injured. The bombing campaign broke Japan's industrial capacity, destroyed. Morale demonstrated that American air power could reach anywhere, destroy anything, and napalm made it possible. Cheap, reliable, scalable. Harvard's development project had cost $5.2 million. The Manhattan Project, $27 billion. Measured in cost per city destroyed, napalm was 1,000 times more efficient than atomic weapons. Tokyo cost $83,000 to incinerate. Hiroshima, $13.5 billion. Efficiency. That's how Fieser thought about it. That's how the military thought about it. That's how America justified it. The war had to end. Japan had to surrender. Convencional invasión would cost millions of lives. Fire was mercy compared to that. Fire saved American soldiers. Fire shortened the war. Fire was necessary. But on the ground, in the cities, fire was hell. Indiscriminate, unstoppably. It killed soldiers and civilians alike. Children, elderly, women, men. The napalm didn't distinguish. It clung and burned until nothing remained. Photographers who documented the aftermath struggled to find words. The images spoke for themselves. Silence captured better than description ever could. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Back in the Pacific, the island hopping campaign continued. Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. 8 square miles of volcanic rock, heavily fortified. 11 miles of tunnels, 1,500 caves and bunkers, 21,000 Japanese defenders, orders to fight to the death. No retreat, no surrender. The Marines landed expecting resistance. They got annihilation. Japanese gunners allowed the first waves to reach the beach before opening fire. Mortars, artillery, machine guns, interlocking fields of fire, pre-registered coordinates. The beach became a killing ground. Men died before reaching cover. Landing craft burned. Supplies never made it ashore. But the Marines brought flamethrowers, dozens of them, and flamethrower tanks, M4 Shermans, modified with flamethrower nozzles. They carried 300 gallons of napalm, enough for 80 shots. Each shot, a 3-second burst. Each burst, death for anyone inside a bunker. The flamethrower tanks changed the battle. They approached fortifications artillery couldn't destroy. Fired into gun slits, into cave mouths. The napalm flowed inside, ignited, filled the space with fire and superheated gas. Defenders who survived the flames suffocated. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Those who tried to escape ran into rifle fire. There was no escape, only choices about how to die. Corporal Herschel Williams became famous on Iwo Jima, a flamethrower operator, Medal of Honor recipient. For 4 hours on February 23rd, he destroyed 7 pillboxes, alone, covered by 4 riflemen. He crawled through enemy fire, positioned himself within range, unleashed napalm. Moved to the next position, repeated 7 times, each time expecting a bullet, each time surviving. His citation called it heroism, and it was, but it was also chemistry. Without napalm, Williams D's attempting the first pillbox. Grenades wouldn't work. Explosive charges would expose him too long. Only napalm, projected from 30 yards, gave him a chance. The weapon made the hero possible. Fieser's gel turned courage into effectiveness. The battle for Iwo Jima lasted 36 days. 7,000 Americans killed, 20,000 Japanese killed. Nearly all the Japanese dead came from fortifications, caves, bunkers, tunnels, most killed by flamethrowers, most killed by napalm. When the island finally fell, the Marines had used over 800 flamethrowers, expended thousands of gallons of fuel. The volcanic rock was a scorched black in places, permanently, a geological scar. Okinawa came next, April 1st, 1945, the final island before Japan itself. 82 days of fighting, the bloodiest battle of the Pacific. 120,000 Japanese defenders. This time, they didn't defend the beaches. They retreated to the interior, to caves in limestone cliffs, to fortified positions on ridges. They waited, and the Americans brought more napalm than ever before. Flamethrower tanks, infantry flamethrowers, aerial bombs. They burned the island section by section, ridge by ridge, cave by cave. Over 200,000 gallons of napalm used. The cliffs smoked for weeks. Bodies lay in caves for months before burial details could reach them. Some caves were simply sealed, entombed, too dangerous to clear, too full of dead. By war's end, napalm had become the defining weapon of the Pacific campaign, more effective than artillery, more decisive than bombs, more feared than bayonets. Japanese soldiers called American flamethrower operators death demons. Orders circulated to kill them first, always, at any cost. Because once a flamethrower reached a position, that position ended, no exceptions. But while America perfected napalm, its enemies struggled to respond. Germany attempted to develop its own version. Wehrmacht intelligence collected reports from the Eastern Front. Soviet forces had captured American equipment, shipped it to Germany. Engineers studied the flamethrowers. Chemists analyzed the fuel residue. They identified the thickening agents, understood the principle, but replicating it proved impossible. Germany lacked the industrial chemistry infrastructure. The petroleum refineries were bombed. The supply chains disrupted. Raw materials were unavailable. They tried substitutes, coal tar derivatives, synthetic soaps. Nothing worked as well as napalm. The gels separated, or burned too quickly, or failed to ignite reliably. By 1944, Germany abandoned the effort. They had bigger problems. The Eastern and Western fronts were collapsing. Resources went to tanks and ammunition, not experimental incendiaries. Japan faced similar failures. Their chemists were skilled, their motivation high, but they lacked access to the necessary petroleum products. Naphthenate acid required specific crude oil types. Japan's conquered territories in Southeast Asia produced oil, but refining it to the required specifications was beyond their capabilities. The infrastructure didn't exist. Time ran out before they could build it. So napalm remained an American monopoly, a chemical advantage invisible in most histories. The atomic bomb gets remembered, the Raider, the code breaking. But napalm quietly killed more, burned more, destroyed more, and terrified more than perhaps any other weapon America fielded. By August 1945, Japan was defeated. The atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki convinced the emperor to surrender, but the surrender came after 64 cities had already burned, after hundreds of thousands had died in firestorms. The atomic bombs were the exclamation point. Napalm wrote the sentence. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's capitulation. The war was over. In Cambridge, Louis Fieser learned the news like everyone else. Radio broadcasts, newspaper headlines, celebrations in the streets. He felt relief, satisfaction, pride perhaps. His invention had worked, had contributed to victory, had saved American lives by ending the war sooner. But he also felt something else. Unease. He'd read some reports, seen some photographs. The Tokyo raid, the civilian casualties. He designed napalm for structures, for military targets, bunkers, fortifications, not for people, not for children. The distinction blurred somewhere between Cambridge and Tokyo, between intention and reality. Fieser returned to teaching in 1946, resumed his research on vitamins and steroids, published papers, mentored students, received awards. The National Medal of Science came later. Recognition for his broader contributions to chemistry. Napalm was mentioned, briefly, clinically, a wartime necessity, nothing more. For 25 years, Fieser was celebrated, the inventor who helped win the war, the chemist who made fire efficient. At conferences, colleagues congratulated him. Students studied his work. The military awarded commendations. Napalm had become its standard issue. Use it in Korea. Use it in countless smaller conflicts. It worked. That's all that mattered. Then came Vietnam. Korea had been acceptable. Napalm against North Korean and Chinese troops, against bunkers and fortifications, military targets. The public barely noticed, but Vietnam was different. Television cameras captured the war, journalists embedded with troops. Photographs reached American living rooms, and one photograph, more than any other, changed everything. June 8, 1972. A South Vietnamese pilot, confused or panicked, dropped napalm on the wrong target. The village of Trang Bang, his own civilians, his own forces. 9-year-old Phan Thi Kim Phuc ran down the road, naked, screaming, her clothes burned away, her skin blackened and peeling, arms outstretched. Behind her, smoke, chaos, other children, all running, all burning. Associated Press photographer Nick Ut captured the moment. The image appeared on front pages worldwide, instantly iconic, instantly damning. The girl became Napalm Girl, the symbol of war's cruelty, of America's weapon, of what fire does to children. Fieser saw the photograph, read the articles, the accusations, the protests. Students occupied campuses demanding universities cut ties with military research. Dow Chemical, napalm's largest manufacturer, became a target. Boycotts, demonstrations. 12. Executives couldn't recruit on college campuses. The company's reputation collapsed. In 1969, Dow stopped producing napalm, not because of cost, because of shame. And suddenly, after 25 years of praise, Fieser was napalm's daddy, a pariah. Letters arrived at his home, angry, accusing, hateful. Students who once admired him now looked away. Colleagues stopped mentioning his name in certain contexts. The Harvard Gazette rewrote his official biography, removed references to napalm, emphasized his work on vitamin K, on cortisone, on antimalarial drugs. Anything else? Fieser felt the shift, the judgment, and he struggled with it. On June 19, 1972, reading about the Trang Bang incident, he sat at his desk and wrote a letter to President Richard Nixon. The letter was brief, careful. It suggested that an international agreement should be sought to outlaw napalm, to ban its use against civilians. He didn't apologize, didn't express regret for inventing it. But the letter's existence spoke volumes. Nixon's science advisor, Edward David, replied, "Polite, non-committal." The use of napalm, he wrote, was difficult to predict or control. Your suggestion will be given very careful attention. Translation: nothing would change. Fieser understood. He later told the New York Times, "I got the brush off from Nixon." But Fieser never regretted creating napalm, not publicly, not in his final years. When journalists asked, he repeated the same defense. "We thought it would be used against structures, not against babies and Buddhists." He compared himself to a gun manufacturer. The person who makes a rifle isn't responsible if it's used to shoot the president. The logic was clean, consistent, perhaps even true. A chemist discovers properties of matter. Applications follow. He couldn't predict how generals would use his invention, how pilots would deploy it, how wars would evolve. He'd solved the scientific problem, made gasoline stick, made fire last. The rest wasn't his domain. But the families who lost children in Tokyo disagreed. The survivors of Trang Bang disagreed. The soldiers who wielded flamethrowers and never slept well again disagreed. The line between discovery and responsibility, between invention and consequence, proved harder to draw than Fieser's formulas. On July 25, 1977, Louis Fieser died at his home in Massachusetts. He was 78 years old, lung cancer. He'd been a chain smoker for decades. Only after his diagnosis in 1965 did he quit. By then, the damage was done. His obituaries were respectful, acknowledged his contributions, mentioned napalm briefly, focused on his other work, the vitamin K synthesis, the students he'd taught, the papers he'd published. Few mentioned that his invention had killed hundreds of thousands, that it had shaped the nature of modern warfare, that it had become synonymous with horror in popular imagination. Apocalypse Now would release 2 years later. "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" would become cinema's most famous line about war's madness. Napalm Death, the punk band, would form. Banksy would paint napalm-themed street art. The weapon had transcended its chemistry, become symbol, become metaphor, become shorthand for everything brutal about American power. The United Nations banned napalm use against civilian targets in 1980, 3 years after Fieser's death. Many nations signed. The United States did not. America destroyed its last official stockpile in 2001, a public ceremony. Chemist invited, but reports emerged of Mark 77 bombs used in Iraq in 2003. Similar composition, similar effects, different name. Napalm lived on under other labels, and the science Fieser pioneered spread. Other nations developed their own versions. The Soviet Union, Britain, France, Israel. Napalm became a universal tool of modern militaries. Cheap, effective, terrifying. It remained legal against combatants under international law. The distinction between combatant and civilian in burning cities proved academic. Today, Fanti Kim Phuc lives in Canada. She survived her burns, underwent 17 surgeries. The scars remain. Physical, emotional. In interviews, she speaks carefully, chooses words precisely. About napalm, she says, "A knife can be used for good in the hands of people using it. If you are using that to destroy people, it is wrong, terribly, evil." The question of responsibility never resolved. Fieser insisted a bore none. Critics insisted a bore all. The truth, likely, sits between. He invented napalm, knowing it would burn. Knowing it would kill, he designed it for that purpose. But he didn't order the Tokyo raid, didn't fly the bombers, didn't target civilians. He made the knife. Others chose where to thrust it. The history of technology is full of such men. Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb, Nobel and dynamite, Kalashnikov and the AK-47, inventors who gave humanity tools and watched those tools become weapons, who justified their work through abstraction, through separation of science from application, through the belief that knowledge itself is neutral. That morality begins only at the moment of use. Perhaps they're right, perhaps they're wrong. The debate continues. But the dead remain dead, the burned remain scarred. And napalm, born in a Harvard basement on Valentine's Day 1942, remains one of the 20th century's most effective and most controversial inventions. Its burn time extended from seconds to minutes. Its temperature raised to levels that melt metal. Its adhesion perfected to the point where water couldn't wash it away. All problems solved, all metrics optimized. All goals achieved. Fieser succeeded completely. The gel worked exactly as designed, exactly as intended, exactly as tested on that soccer field in 1942. The only question that remained, the one Fieser could never fully answer, was whether succeeding so completely was something to celebrate or something to mourn. Whether making fire efficient made the world safer or more dangerous. Whether the American lives saved justified the Japanese lives lost. Whether intention mattered when consequences were absolute. Fieser died without resolving these questions. Perhaps no one can. The calculus of war refuses easy answers. Moral certainty dissolves in fire. All that remains are the facts. Napalm worked. It burned longer, stuck harder, killed more efficiently. And that efficiency, that terrible perfection, is Fieser's legacy. Not the medals, not the honors, not the vitamin K synthesis, but the gel that burned for 10 minutes, that clung to skin, that turned bunkers into ovens and cities into infernos, that saved Marines on Tarawa and incinerated children in Tokyo. Both truths, simultaneously, unreconcilably. The story of napalm is not a story of evil. Fieser was not a monster. He was a chemist, methodical, brilliant, patriotic. He solved a problem his country asked him to solve. He did it well. He contributed to victory. By any measure, he succeeded. But success in chemistry is measured in reactions, in formulas, in reproducible results. Success in war is measured in bodies, in cities destroyed, in enemies defeated. The two measurements, though related, are not the same. And when the war ended, when the soldiers came home, when the cameras turned off, and the medals were distributed, and the victory parodies ended, one question lingered in the smoke. The question no one wanted to ask. The question Fieser has spent 30 years avoiding. The question that haunted him in his final days as cancer, consumed his lungs, the way his invention consumed everything it touched. Was it worth it? The Marines on Iwo Jima would say yes. The children of Tokyo would say no. Fieser, carefully, said both, or neither. He said he wasn't qualified to judge. He said judgment belonged to others, to historians, to ethicists, to anyone but him. He was just the chemist, just the inventor, just the man who made fire stick. But fire, once ignited, burns beyond the intentions of those who lit the match. It consumes, it spreads, it outlives its creators. Napalm burned through the Second World War, through Korea, through Vietnam, through Iraq, through Syria. It burns still, in stockpiles and in memory, a weapon that refuses to become obsolete because efficiency never goes out of style. Because fire, made perfect, remains perfect, regardless of what it burns. And Louis Fieser, the quiet professor who wanted only to make a better incendiary, discovered that some problems, once solved, can never be unsolved. That some inventions, once released, can never be recalled. That some fires, once started, burn forever. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.